Even though popular horror films often spawn a deluge of sequels, most of them turn out to be a bit naff. But even the worst entries can have redeemable qualities, whether it's an innovative kill, a solid performance, or a clever twist. The film in question may be dire, but a so bad it's good flick can be worth watching. But there are certain sequels, prequels, and reboots that aren't even ironically entertaining. Rather than laughing at how bad these duds are, viewers will be bored out of their minds from beginning to end. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are 10 horror movies everyone skips in a franchise. Number 10. The Predator. Although Predator is a classic, the sci-fi slasher saga had trouble finding its feet for decades. Things were looking up when a new entry was announced in 2018 called The Predator, directed by Shane Black, who starred in the original. Black was one of the funniest Hollywood writers during the 90s and had never made a bad movie before, or yet. The Predator also boasted a phenomenal cast, including Sterling K. Brown, Olivia Munn, Thomas Jane, Boyd Holbrook, Jacob Tremblay, and Keegan-Michael Key. Against the odds, The Predator was a total misfire. The god-awful story involves the dreadlocked extraterrestrials trying to stop climate change on Earth so they can harvest the spinal fluid of an autistic child, believing he's the key to creating a super predator. None of the jokes work, the butchered editing makes the action incomprehensible, and none of the characters are likable. To cap it all off, The Predator concludes with forced sequel bait, which is more embarrassing in hindsight considering it never amounted to anything. Though Predator got back on track with the prequel, Prey, you'd never believe the IP would recover after watching this tasteless schlock. Number 9. The Final Destination. Final Destination centers around a group of teens, obviously played by 25-year-olds, who narrowly cheat death. The Grim Reaper is so ticked off, he triggers disasters around the survivors, hoping to collect their souls. The follow-ups may have been sloppy, but try to make up for it with imaginative death sequences. The car pile-up in the first sequel has become iconic due to its nightmare-inducing imagery. The third entry caused an entire generation to develop a phobia of tanning beds. The last-minute twist in Final Destination 5 redeemed an otherwise average flick. Sadly though, the fourth installment, The Final Destination, stands out for all the wrong reasons. Any potentially scary moments are let down by cartoonish CGI and shabby editing. The characters are walking cliches, barely given any development before they meet their inevitable doom, so we don't care when they succumb to their fate. The finale, which takes place on a malfunctioning escalator, should be absolutely nail-biting, but due to the phony effects and hammy acting, it would be more fitting in a parody. And with no Tony Todd this time around, there isn't a single reason to check out this blunder. Number 8. Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. When it comes to Halloween, the bad far outweighs the good. Having said that, even the worst entries have their defenders. Halloween 3: Season of the Witch received a lot of flack due to Michael Myers' absence, but has since developed a cult following. Halloween Resurrection is undeniably terrible, but it's too goofy to miss. I mean, who doesn't want to see Michael Myers fight Busta Rhymes in a reality TV show? Halloween Ends was divisive, but completionists are compelled to watch it since it's the closing chapter of the series. However, it's virtually impossible to find anything positive to say about Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. What made John Carpenter's Halloween so iconic was how simple the premise was. Michael Myers was pure evil, meaning that there was no rhyme or reason behind his heinous actions. But according to The Curse of Michael Myers, a druid cult had been controlling the titular sociopath for years. The cult urged Michael to end his own bloodline, which somehow helped them run the world. The cult leader also created clones of Michael for unspecified reasons. As hard as it is to believe, this clunker could have been worse, since the original cut ends by revealing Michael impregnated his own niece. Seriously? Not only is this subplot ridiculous, it doesn't make sense. If the cult want Michael to murder all his relatives, why would they make him sire one? Though it's usually reassuring when a long-time horror property goes against the grain, The Curse of Michael Myers went too far. Number 7. Friday the 13th: A New Beginning. Friday the 13th, the final chapter, concluded with Tommy Jarvis ramming a knife through Jason Voorhees' skull, seemingly ending his reign of terror for good. So, when a sequel was announced, there was a lot of speculation how the Camp Crystal Lake maniac could return. In Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, Tommy has been left traumatized by his experience with Jason, causing him to spend years in a psychiatric institution. When patients start being picked off by an unseen serial killer, Spoiler, Tommy is convinced Jason is behind it all. During the climax, the murderer is seen sporting a hockey mask, supposedly confirming the machete-wielding psychopath has risen from the grave. But in the final moments, the antagonist is revealed to be a copycat. Naturally, viewers were fuming, since they assumed Jason would prominently feature in Friday the 13th: A New Beginning. Instead, the main villain turned out to be just some guy. Although people were similarly peeved about Michael Myers' absence in Halloween 3, at least the threequel didn't pretend he was in it. A New Beginning, on the other hand, was advertised as the return of Jason Voorhees, which turned out to be a blatant lie. As a result, Friday the 13th veterans have no qualms about skipping this blunder when binging the series. Number 5. Critters Attack. Although the Critters sequels didn't surpass the first one, each of them had something to offer. Critters 2, the main course, had the memorable sequence of the Krite ball squashing the locals. Critters 3 is worth watching purely to see Leonardo DiCaprio's acting debut. Critters 4 is trash, but Brad Dourif and Angela Bassett make the most of an appalling script. So when it was announced Critters was getting rebooted, longtime fans were hoping for another fun and campy creature feature. Sadly, Critters Attack dropped the ball big time. It's apparent early on this remake doesn't have a single creative idea, since it recycles defining moments from previous installments. The characters are bland, so it's challenging to care about anyone. One of the biggest letdowns is the Krites themselves. While the practical effects are decent, the intergalactic beasts lack any menace or personality. The gore and kills feel uninspired, which is a death sentence for a franchise that normally thrives on over-elaborate violence. Having Dee Wallace return should have been a highlight, but Critters Attack barely gives the original heroine anything meaningful to do. Instead of being a driving force, she's sidelined in favor of the dull teen protagonists. Yay! Number 4. Survival of the Dead. George A. Romero pioneered the zombie film genre with Night of the Living Dead back in the 60s. He released a superior sequel called Dawn of the Dead a decade later, proving his directorial debut wasn't a fluke. The follow-ups mightn't have had the same impact, but still had plenty of fresh ideas. However, it was obvious the horror maestro had lost his spark by the time he directed Survival of the Dead. It's all the more tragic considering it was the last film Romero helmed. Simply put, this dreck feels like a pitiful retread with a fraction of the innovation of what came before. The story lacks the social commentary that made Romero's earlier work so riveting. It's bogged down by a weak script, flat characters, and bafflingly bad dialogue. The CGI gore looks cheap and artificial, diluting any tension or atmosphere. Perhaps the biggest disappointment is the zombies themselves. Romero once used the undead as a metaphor for consumerism, class struggles, and other societal issues. But here, the zombies aren't just generic flesh eaters, they're background noise. Overall, Survival of the Dead is a snooze fest that tarnishes Romero's legacy more than it contributes to it. Number 3. Hostel Part 3. Hostel Part 2 isn't as gripping as the original, but that doesn't mean it's not without merit. The opening is so shocking, it's guaranteed to catch anybody off guard. It also contains some unsettling death sequences that's sure to satiate gorehounds, especially the literal bloodbath scene. Hostel Part 3, on the other hand, is such a lifeless cash grab, it killed Eli Roth's grisly saga then and there. Set in Las Vegas, this needless installment trades eerie atmosphere for an uncreative setting that lacks any real tension. The characters are forgettable, the acting is mediocre at best, and the plot twists are insultingly predictable. The torture scenes are watered down, so die-hard fans will have little incentive to give Part 3 a go. The practical effects are unconvincing, and the kills seem more gimmicky than grueling. The biggest issue is how Hostel Part 3 fails miserably to justify its existence. It adds nothing new to the visceral saga, and lacks the brutality or suspense that made the first two films engaging. Once the credits roll, it's obvious the Hostel brand should have quit while it was ahead. Number 2. Candyman 3: Day of the Dead. Candyman revolves around a hook-handed spirit called Daniel Robitaille, who torments anyone who dares to summon him. Although Candyman could have been a run-of-the-mill spook story, it made a lasting impression thanks to its well-written script, biting social commentary, and Tony Todd's towering performance as the thought-provoking antagonist. Due to Candyman's critical success, it was no surprise when a sequel got greenlit. Though Candyman Farewell to the Flesh was a pale imitation reputation of its predecessor, Todd's oozing charisma made it worth watching. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about Candyman 3: Day of the Dead. Not only does this direct-to-video tripe copy the same basic premise from the original, it relies on cheap jump scares and excessive gore rather than the eerie psychological horror that made the first movie so chilling. Day of the Dead feels like Candyman in name only, as it disregards the deeper themes of race, injustice, and urban folklore. Todd is utterly wasted, since Robitaille is depicted as a flimsy slasher villain rather than a tragic, vengeful figure. Even the biggest fans of the series should give Day of the Dead a wide berth, since it disrespects Tony Todd and the Candyman name as a whole. Number 1. The Omen 4: Awakening. Even though the third Omen installment, The Final Conflict, wasn't great, at least it wraps things up. It literally is there in the title. The film concludes with the Antichrist, Damien Thorn, being fatally stabbed by the Megiddo dagger before he has a chance to stop the second coming of Christ. Basically, good guys win, bad guys lose. So why in the literal hell is there a sequel? Omen 4: The Awakening imitates the original so shamelessly, it's basically a remake. The new Antichrist, Delia, is nowhere near as menacing or compelling as Damien, and her supposed evil moments come off as laughable rather than chilling. The script is filled with cliches, the pacing is painfully slow, and the suspense is non-existent. By the time the twist ending arrives, it's too little too late. Instead of a shocking revelation, it feels like a desperate attempt to justify why the franchise should continue, despite the fact the previous film tied up every loose end. The Awakening is a tedious mess that fails as both a horror film and a continuation of the Omen legacy. If watched out of context, you'd never believe this atrocity had any connection to one of the most iconic horror films ever made.